The wind came down the Wyoming mountains that night like a living thing, slamming against Eli Mercer's cabin with the force of a dozen angry fists. Snow whipped across the valley, the kind that blinded a man even with his eyes open. No one traveled in weather like this. No one survived outside for long. Eli sat close to the iron stove, mending an old leather bridle, listening to the storm scream around him like it wanted in. Then came the knock. It was so soft he thought it was just a branch breaking loose, but the second knock came harder, shaky and unsure, but real. Eli stood slow, lifted his Winchester from its pegs, and walked to the door. No one knocked on a man's door during a storm like this unless something was terribly wrong. "Who's there?" he called. A thin woman's voice came through the wind. "Please, help." Eli pulled the door open, and the storm nearly ripped it from his hands. Snow swirled inside like white smoke. A figure stood on the porch, half buried in frost. Her dress was frozen stiff, her hair packed with ice, and her lips were so pale they scared him. She held a small carpet bag to her chest, like it was the last thing she owned. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. He grabbed her arm, thin even through the frozen wool, and pulled her inside. She stumbled, shaking so hard her teeth made a sound like tiny bells. Eli shoved the door shut, bracing it against the wind. "Get those wet clothes off," he said, grabbing a flannel shirt from a peg. "They'll kill you faster than a bullet out here." He turned his back while she struggled out of the frozen dress. He fed more wood into the stove until it glowed bright. When he finally turned around, she was wrapped in his shirt and clutching the blanket he handed her. Her face had a little color now, but not much. "Sit close to the fire," he said. "Drink this." He poured her a cup of hot coffee. Even holding the cup, her hands shook so badly she nearly spilled it. She sipped slow, letting the warmth settle into her bones. Eli ladled thick bean soup into a tin bowl and watched as she ate like someone who hadn't tasted food in days. Only when her breathing steadied did he ask, "Why were you out in that storm?" She looked up, and he saw her eyes, green like summer sage, but shadowed. "My name is Maggie Doyle. I came from Boston to marry Owen Blackledge." Eli froze. He knew Owen. Everyone did. Biggest rancher in the valley. Greedy. Hard. A man who saw people more as property than souls. "He changed his mind," she continued quietly. "He took one look at me at Roland Station and said I wasn't fit for ranch work. Handed me coach fare and sent me back toward town. The hotel wouldn't take me without more money, and the station master said the next coach home wouldn't come for a week." "So you tried to walk," Eli said. She nodded. "I didn't realize the storm would hit this fast." "You're a mail-order bride," he said gently. "Was," she corrected. "Now I'm nothing. Just someone who sold everything she owned for a promise that wasn't real." Eli stood and checked the shutters. The wind hammered them again, determined to break inside. He added more wood to the fire. "This is Eli Mercer's cabin," he said. "You can stay here until the weather clears. No charge. No questions." She looked around his one-room cabin. Tools hung neatly on the walls, his bed in the corner, his mother's quilt folded at the foot of it. Everything simple, everything clean, everything honest. "I can work for my keep," she said. "Cook, clean, mend. I won't be a burden." "You're not a burden," he said. "You're a person in trouble, that's enough." She hesitated, then whispered, "Thank you." "Eli." "You take the bed," he said, grabbing his buffalo robe. "I'll sleep by the stove." "I couldn't." "You can, and you will. I've slept on colder ground than this." She settled onto the bed while he banked the fire for the night. The wind kept screaming, trying to tear the roof away, but his cabin held steady. He chinked every seam with his own hands. Nothing short of God himself would pull it apart. In the quiet, her voice came again. "Why didn't you ask more questions about why he really sent me away?" Eli stared into the fire. "Because a man like Owen Blackledge doesn't change his mind for no reason. And whatever the real reason was, it wasn't you." Silence stretched between them. Then, small as a breath, she asked, "Do you think I'm suitable?" Eli didn't turn around. "Think you're alive. That's the only thing that matters tonight." She made a sound, half laugh, half sob. He didn't look back. Some things folks needed to feel alone, even when they weren't. Long before dawn, the wind finally eased. Snow still fell thick, but gently now. Eli rose quietly, rebuilt the fire, and started breakfast. Maggie woke to the smell of biscuits and coffee. "Roads won't clear for days," he said without turning. "You're safe here until then." She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and watched him cook. For the first time since Boston, her breathing didn't hurt. Outside, the world was buried in snow. Inside, something new, small and fragile, had begun. The storm eased, but winter still pressed heavy on the valley. For days, Eli and Maggie settled into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. She cooked breakfast while he fetched firewood. She mended his shirts while he repaired harness leather. They moved around the cabin like they had known each other longer than a week. On the third morning, Eli looked out the frost-covered window and sighed. Cows need checking. One of the heifers is close to calving. "I'll come with you," Maggie said. "You don't need to go out into the cold." "I need to be useful," she answered. "Please let me help." He hesitated, but finally nodded. He handed her his extra coat, which nearly swallowed her whole, and found old boots that fit after she stuffed rags into the toes. They stepped outside into the white world. Snow still stood shoulder high where Eli had shoveled a path to the barn. Inside, warm breath from the cattle hung in the air like fog. Maggie held the lantern while Eli ran practiced hands along the pregnant heifer's side. "Not today," he murmured, "but soon." "She's beautiful," Maggie said softly. "She's profitable," Eli corrected. "Strong bloodline." Maggie glanced up at him. "You can say she's beautiful. It won't break your cowboy code." For the first time since she arrived, Eli smiled. "Fine. She's beautiful and profitable." Maggie laughed. The sound warmed him more than the stove ever could. Back in the cabin, she taught him how to bank the fire properly for bread making. Her starter bubbled softly in a small crock. When their hands brushed, reaching for the damper, both paused, but neither stepped away. That afternoon, she sat in the rocker mending his shirts, needle flying as he carved a wooden spoon for her. The silence between them felt full rather than empty. That night, the temperature dropped so low the nails in the wall snapped like twigs. Cold crept into every corner. Maggie tried to hide her shivers under the quilt, but Eli heard her teeth chatter. "This is foolish," she whispered. "You take your bed back. I'll sit by the fire." "You'll freeze by the stove," he said. "We both will." She didn't argue because her lips were too cold to move. He made a choice then, practical, not improper. "I'm going to sit on the bed, on top of the covers. We'll share the buffalo robe. Body heat's the only way we get through this night." Silence. Then a soft, "All right." He sat against the headboard and pulled the robe over both of them. She leaned against his side, small and trembling. Slowly, carefully, he put his arm around her shoulders. "Better?" "Yes," she whispered. The storm outside howled, but inside the cabin, they warmed each other in quiet peace. Her head dropped against his shoulder again and again. Each time she tried to pull away, but exhaustion won. Near dawn, she slept lightly against him. Eli sat still, watching the first light creep across the floor. By morning, the cold had eased, but something between them had changed. When their hands brushed at the stove, neither moved away. When she reached around him for the coffee pot, he stepped aside just enough, not too far. Later, she found his mother's Bible on the shelf. "I can read aloud if you like," she said. "My students always said I had a good reading voice." He washed behind the blanket she hung for privacy and listened as her voice filled the cabin. "He maketh me to lie down in green pastures." She read soft and steady while he dressed, and her voice stayed in his mind long after she closed the book. That night she looked at him across the small table. "Eli, if Owen comes looking for me, what then?" "Then he'll find you here," Eli answered, "safe, warm, and under no claim of his. I'm not something to be claimed. No, he said quietly, you're not. That's something Owen Blackledge will learn if he comes knocking. And then, on the 5th morning, horses appeared down the trail. Dark shapes moving fast through the snow. Eli felt his stomach drop. Trouble had found them. He ushered Maggie inside without a word. She understood and slipped into the cabin, not running but not slow either. Owen Blackledge rode up with Sheriff Amos Hale and 2 hired men. Eli stood on the porch, rifle within reach but not in hand. Eli, Owen said, tipping his hat like this was friendly business. Heard you've been harboring stolen property. Eli didn't move. Nothing stolen on my land. My mail-order bride went missing, Owen snapped. She's mine under law. The cabin door opened. Maggie stepped out, blue dress mended and hair pinned proper. She stood tall despite the cold trembling in her hands. I am not yours, she said. You abandoned me at the crossroads. Your own paper says the agreement was ended. She handed the letter to the sheriff. Amos read it carefully. Owen, it says right here you terminated the arrangement. She coerced me, Owen barked. Threatened scandal. I never spoke a single threat, Maggie replied calmly. One of the hired men muttered something ugly. Eli stepped forward, not raising his rifle but blocking Maggie with his body. Careful, Eli said. This doesn't need to get loud. Sheriff Amos cleared his throat. Miss Doyle, are you here of your own free will? I am. Anyone forcing you to stay? Quote, no. Anyone taking liberties? Maggie's voice didn't shake. Mr. Mercer has been respectful and proper in every way. Owen's face went red. The valley will talk. You'll be a scandal. Let them talk, Eli said. Facts won't change. The moment stretched tight as wire. Snow settled. Horses stomped nervously. Even the wind held its breath. Finally, Owen yanked his reins hard. This isn't over. But he didn't win the day. Not this day. Not anymore. Owen rode away angry that day. But trouble didn't leave with him. The valley buzzed with gossip. Some folks believed Owen's lies. Others stood with Eli and Maggie. No matter what people said, simple truth stayed the same. They were 2 good people trying to survive a storm bigger than weather. The next morning, they found the first sign that Owen wasn't done. A dead chicken lay on the porch. No mistake. A warning. Maggie looked at Eli through the window. Teach me to shoot. He studied her. She wasn't a helpless woman from Boston anymore. She was someone ready to stand her ground. All right, he said. Behind the cabin, he showed her how to hold the Winchester steady, how to breathe out slow before pulling the trigger. She learned fast. By the end of the day, she could hit a tin can 3 times out of 5. Not bad for a schoolteacher, Eli said. Not bad for anyone, she answered. That night, they sat quiet by the fire. Tommy Bright, one of Owen's young hired hands, snuck by to warn them that Owen was stirring up trouble in town, calling Eli a thief and Maggie a woman with loose morals. But Tom also said the valley was divided. Good folks didn't like what Owen had done. The truth was spreading. Eli and Maggie didn't speak of it, but both understood the same thing. The world was closing in, demanding answers they hadn't figured out yet. We could marry, Eli said finally, staring at the fire. It would stop the talk. She looked at him long. Is that what you want? He met her eyes, steady, honest. If we marry, it won't be because of fear or gossip. It'll be because we choose it. She nodded softly. Then we wait. And wait, they did. Soon, word reached Reverend Cole, and he came, along with Sheriff Hale, to warn them. Owen was pushing hard, trying to get the judge to declare Maggie his runaway bride. Legal pressure, social pressure, every kind of pressure. I want to speak at church Sunday, Maggie said suddenly. Let the town hear the truth from my own mouth. Reverend Cole blinked. Women don't usually address the congregation. Women also don't usually get abandoned in a storm to die, she said. I have a right to defend my name. Sunday came cold and bright, the church filled with neighbors, curiosity thick as dust. Owen sat up front like he owned the place. Eli and Maggie took the back row. After the sermon, Reverend Cole gestured to her. "Miss Doyle has something to say." Maggie walked to the front with quiet strength. She held Owen's letters in her hands. She told them everything. The promises Owen wrote, the ticket he sent, the lies he told, and the moment he turned his back on her at the station. She held up the termination paper he'd signed. She held up the telegram proving he'd lied about her family. She spoke plain truth, steady and clear. Owen stood, furious. "She's twisting." But Maggie cut him off. "You abandoned me, and Mr. Mercer saved my life." The room buzzed. Mrs. Patterson stood. "This woman helped save Tom Garrett's boy when he broke his arm." Old Tom stood. "Mercer helped half the ranchers in this valley at some point. He ain't the one to accuse." A few more stood with him. Not everyone, but enough. Owen stormed out. The church doors slammed in the wind. That night, Maggie found a small wooden box on Eli's shelf. Inside was a thin gold ring, his mother's. Eli set it in her hand. "I'm not asking you to marry me now. I'm just giving you the choice. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, this is yours." Maggie placed the ring back in the box, set it carefully on the shelf. "When we're ready." But trouble wasn't finished. A rock crashed through the cabin window that same night, a message from Owen without words. Eli fixed the window while Maggie swept up glass with shaking hands. He said nothing, just stood beside her until she stopped shaking. The next morning brought a new kind of test. The storekeeper, Mrs. Harmon, refused to give Maggie credit. Women whispered behind her back, calling her improper. But then Mrs. Patterson walked in and bought Maggie supplies with her own account, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Christian charity doesn't stop just because gossip starts," she said. From that day forward, the valley shifted. People who once ignored Maggie now sought her help. She taught little girls their letters. She tended the sick, delivered babies, and mended neighbors' clothes. Slowly, the valley started to see who she really was. Spring came early. Flowers opened, snow melted. Eli's ranch stood strong until the fire. The new barn caught flames fast, flames climbing high and hungry. Eli and Maggie ran toward it with the entire valley behind them. Maggie spotted fire creeping toward the cabin and shouted orders to cut a fire break. Men, women, and children worked until their arms shook. When the barn collapsed in sparks, everyone knew who lit the match. Owen rode up calm as a king. "Shame about your barn, Mercer. We caught your hired man with a torch," Sheriff Hale said. "He doesn't work for me anymore." But this time, the valley stood with Eli. One rancher stepped forward. "I was going to sell Owen my water rights." "Not anymore." Another stepped forward. "Me neither." Owen's face cracked. He rode off defeated. Eli and Maggie stood together in the smoke, soot on their faces, exhaustion in their bones, but the cabin behind them still standing. "I'm sorry," Maggie said softly. "This fire, all this, it's because of me." Eli took her blistered hands gently. "This happened because Owen is the kind of man who destroys things, and we are the kind of people who build them back." That night, after the valley returned home, Eli tended her hands with salve and soft cloth. "You saved the cabin," he said. "You saved us all." Her eyes filled. "Marriage, is it starting again after fires?" "Sometimes," Eli whispered. "Sometimes it's being the one person who stays when everything burns." She touched his cheek. "Then, I choose this. I choose you." He leaned his forehead against hers, breath warm in the quiet room. "And I choose you." The ring fit her finger like it had always been waiting. Outside, the valley lay under a calm night sky. Inside, two people who once were strangers lay close in the marriage bed, hands intertwined, hearts steady. The storm that brought her to his door had changed everything, shaping a home, a family, and a love stronger than any wind the mountains could send.